Alright guys, so today I've got none other than Nix Ainley joining me.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm extremely well, thank
Good.
you. Thank you so much. Finally, we got around to doing this.
I know,
This has been
it's taken some time, but it's happened.
2.5, 3 months, if not more, in the process.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking today, I was like, because I don't like talking on these anyway, so I was a bit nervous because of your radio background. And
Oh, stop.
like, roles reversed today, so I'm going to be interviewing yourself.
I just sat here and I thought, my goodness, I can't remember the last time someone interviewed me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So how long have you been in radio?
I've been in radio in Australia now. This will be my 9th year.
Wow.
And then before that, I worked in media overseas for nearly 8 years on top of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Long time.
Yeah, been around. I've done TV, I've done radio, obviously, a bit of print and a lot of online. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So I hope there's going to be no judgment when this comes out.
No. Yeah, so everything from sports right through to obviously breakfast radio, which I recently was forced to step down from just because of what we're going to talk about, parenting and motherhood and careers.
Yeah. So I will take you back to, we'll draw towards the campaign, and when did you first, so Nix actually reached out and you interviewed me on the show.
Yes.
Which is an incredible platform for getting the awareness out, so I thank you for that. How did you come across it in the first place?
So I came across it from a colleague of mine that I was working with at the time, who I think is a friend of yours or something. Anyway, she just tagged me in something and said, have you got across this? Not sure if this is your field. I had a look into what you were doing, and I honestly, Glenn, I fell in love with it straight away because I'm so passionate about mental health and the stories behind people, and I think that using the platform of people who, and I'll be honest, I'm on a lower level than some of the people that you've spoken to, but people who so often have such a solid face to the public, yet underneath so many people have got broken stories, and you know, the idea of it is just sensational. So I couldn't wait to jump on board. It's a fantastic campaign.
Yeah, thank you. And so today we've just shot.
Yes.
So I know a lot of people, when they've interviewed me and they've asked me how to get people into a certain space, was there any apprehension when you was coming, or did you not know what to expect, or how did you feel?
Well, halfway on my way here, I was so busy trying not to have a crash in the middle of the city. I wasn't even thinking, and then it was really as I pulled up and I thought, wow, we're actually doing this because I've wanted, we've had that many conversations to do this, and I was surprised at how quickly, for me, I think I was prepared and ready to do that, because it didn't take me long to really get into that space of feeling that emotion straight away.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'll be throwing some of the images up shortly, guys. But what I suppose we'll chat about is your story and what really resonated and what you were thinking about when you're going through that image.
There were actually 2 different schools of thought for me when I was going through that image. I will get emotional because I guess that's what you do on these things. But the first one was probably the most current situation for me, and that's the heartbreak that I've had to go through in juggling parenting and being a mother and career. Right. And for me, after a very long battle, 2.5 years, and I went through, I should set some context here. I've got 3.5-year-old twin boys. And I fell pregnant very suddenly. It was a big surprise. I'd come out of a long relationship, in a new relationship, and then we fell pregnant, which was exciting, but then we found out there were 2. And so in many ways I wasn't quite in that ready to be a mother headspace, which a lot of people aren't necessarily in. And even if you are, it's still such a huge change to your life. And then to have not 1 but 2 children that you're trying to bond with straight away, and we had a lot of difficulties. So when I went back to work, and I was very keen to get back to work because I love my job so passionately, I was juggling completely sleepless nights. Both my twins had colic. They had reflux. We had to rely on an au pair to help us.
And this was your morning radio?
And this was in breakfast, And
this was 4 a.m. starts, or?
4 a.m. So I was often going to sleep on the couch at sort of 3 o'clock thinking I may as well not even go to sleep, waking myself up to my alarm at 4, getting up. I went to work every day with no makeup, my hair was just thrown up. I literally looked like I fell out of bed because my kids didn't sleep, and they didn't sleep until, the first one really didn't sleep through the night until he was about 12 months, and the second one when he was 19 months. And it was that constant, that pacing up and down the hallway with just hysterical kids. I used to drive for hours I would get home and I would get to 6 o'clock and I would start to get anxiety because I knew what was ahead of me for that night, and I knew that it was going to be a battle with one or both of them. And some nights, some days, I just break down in floods of tears, not knowing how to handle these two kids. And for me, work was that bit of me. It was. I'd built a big audience at the time at the radio station I was at that time, and it was selfish. I felt selfish about it, and I think that's something that a lot of mums struggle with, is that balance, because I desperately wanted to be with my boys, and I desperately wanted to enjoy every second, and I didn't. And I guiltily loved going to work. And I really carried that for a very long time, and in many ways I carry it still, because when I made the decision finally to step down from work full time, it was the toughest decision. I still feel like I've lost part of my identity. Even though I'm still on air in a different capacity, and I'm so grateful. But it was a really hard thing. So that was the juggling, even just trying to survive. It was survival. For a long time it felt just like survival.
And I mean, being a father myself, and I know my wife, when she first went to a mother's group, like when you first have your first child and they tell you to go, and she honestly had a really bad experience, because all the mothers, whether they were putting the front on, just saying that their kid was perfect and things like that. So my wife never went back. She just couldn't resonate, because our first child, Lincoln, he didn't sleep for a while. He didn't cry, but he was just awake constantly, so she was tired and she was juggling her job and things like this. But in saying that, did you feel a sense of still keeping up appearances when you had to go to work as well?
Oh, 100%. And my co-host at the time actually had a young child and a newborn on the way, or a new one on the way, who's then born sort of 6 months after my boys. And I felt at times like I couldn't do anything but be happy about everything, because his experience was different to my experience, and I felt like I never wanted to be that dead weight. How you go, well, actually, quite frankly, I'm so exhausted, I can't think. I don't even know how I'm holding a talk break together, but I know that I love this, and I know that I feel guilty that I'm not there, and it is almost an impossible juggle. But it's funny you talk about mother's group, because I can relate to your wife, because I had the same experience. And a friend of mine said, come on down to this mother's group, and here am I juggling these two little feral boys. I love them, but and here were these perfectly, I turned up to this mother's group. I didn't have a picnic blanket. I didn't have snacks. I didn't have toys. And I sat down and thought, I am the most pathetic mother, because I haven't thought of these basic things. And my friends giving me snacks to give to my kids, and I never went back. And the ladies that were there like, oh, so-and-so's got twins and she does this, and I felt so low in myself that I wasn't a good enough mother. And now, 2.5 years down the track, I can sit there and say, you know what, they don't know what I was going through. We hadn't slept for 6 months at that stage. We had so much going on. We had colic, we had all sorts of issues. My kids were in and out of hospital with it. And we've come off the back of to digress, but we've also come off the back of a totally unique birthing situation. Like, my kids were in NICU. I didn't touch my kids for 4 days.
Wow.
And when I did, it was through gloves in a glass box with tubes coming out of them. And so the whole thing was so different to the dream I expected. So I think, it's so hard.
And that was still a relatively new relationship, so you were getting to know each other further as well?
We had literally been together. When we joke about, how old are the kids plus the 6-7 months that they were in, but it was a very new relationship. We didn't know each other. We were both still recovering from previous relationships, and we knew that. So we've grown together more as parents than as a couple. And that's something that we often sort of sit there and say, sometimes when we disagree on things, we're still getting to know each other.
And the reason I bring that up is because when you're going through that stage anyway, and your anxiety yourself is heightened, how does the partner react to things like that? Because I know that me and my wife, we fought daily.
Yeah.
Like just trying to deal with a child, and then it's your turn, it's my time. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. Well, I've got work. You've got work. Like it's an uphill battle.
As I said, it is.
So with twins.
Oh. You know, I sit here sometimes now and even think, is this my life? It's so bizarre.
Because how old are they now?
They're 3.
Right.
So we haven't progressed very far.
And it doesn't stop in that first year, does it?
Do you know what? And this is probably one of the biggest things that hit me. So 5 months ago, we were throwing a little bit of a curveball with one of our sons. And I think the biggest thing that hit me was that was a point where I had to start taking a look back at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that bigger picture, you're right, involved my partner and his job, the kids, where we were as a family, because we were a new family unit and a completely new family unit. And, you know, we've got the family of 4 straight up. And you know what? Everybody will make those goddamn twin jokes.
Yeah.
That you just feel like if somebody else says to me, well, you don't have to have any more, or a 2-for-1 deal, you think, oh. But it was one of those eye-opening situations where I had to take a step back and look at everything, and I can't remember where we're going with that. I just
relationship.
And I realised that our relationship was built sort of as 2 individuals.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, it wasn't all working together.
Yeah.
And that's that point where you have to just go, okay, something's not right here. And that was, for us, we had a situation 5 months ago when my son was diagnosed with some learning difficulties and some developmental issues, and that was the point where I stepped back and went, I don't think we can do this, all of this.
Yeah. Wow.
It was the hardest, and that was, to me, I kept on fighting. I was trying like so many, and I think the hardest thing is for women out there, and I think men fall into the same category. I don't want this to be one of those, you know, poor mums. I can only speak on the perspective of myself and mums.
Yeah.
Because that's all I know. But I think one of the biggest things is we benchmark ourselves against people out there who are doing so much. They're politicians with 2 young kids, or they're you know, radio stars, and they're in cap cities and they've got 2 young kids, and they've got, but everybody's behind the scenes setup is differently.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. And
ours came back to a lack of support in the situation that because we moved for another radio station opportunity, and then it came down to juggling twins is different to juggling you know, one after the other, and not saying it's harder or worse, it's just different.
Yeah.
You know, having those 2. And then one of the things that I realised when I started looking at that big package and saying this isn't working and I'm going to have to make a really tough decision for me, was I looked back and realised that I'm comparing myself against other people. And I was also carrying 2.5 years of exhaustion, if not more, from these kids. And I had never let myself recover. And I know now that I had postnatal anxiety. I know I had postnatal depression as well, and that's not what they call it these days, but whatever they call it. Yeah. But I hadn't, you know, like so many mums out there, you're borderline, and perhaps like me, you've had anxiety or depression issues previously, or mental health issues in the past, so you probably are very aware of it. So therefore, you're almost less likely to go and get help and support, because you also know that you have the strength to go through it.
Yeah.
Because I've had issues before, and I was like, I can feel that I'm down, I can feel that my anxiety is very heightened, I can feel I'm not dealing with these things, but I also know that I have the strategies in myself to deal with it. So instead of probably reaching out when I should have, I was like, no, I can power through, I can get back into fitness to help me, because that's something that has always helped me. But then suddenly, I've got 2 boys and a full-time job, I couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realise, is that your time, like, and this is behalf on fathers, I'd say, is your time is just not yours no more.
No.
Like, everything's invested to your children, and then your relationships suffer. Because there's no time for you to have that downtime. You're both too tired to even speak to each other. And then you snap at each other over the littlest things. And like you say, I think even as a male, and you see some of your friends still going out, and you see, like, there's a very big culture in the UK, and I won't say it's everybody, but it's kind of like a lot of the males tend to work, and then Friday, Saturday they go out,
Yeah,
and a lot of the
go to the
women
pub and-
look after the children. Now, I think that's changing obviously with times.
Yeah.
I've never had that mentality because I don't go out that much because I've got kids. Yeah, like you just don't go out.
There we go.
Like your social level, you just don't go out.
Yeah.
But I think when you do see socials and you see these people, like you say, celebrities, and you see them with 2.4 kids, and say Angelina Jolie when she got like 5 kids and stuff, and you kind of like going, how the hell? Because one child is enough sometimes. So like 5, and I think that's the good thing about this campaign being mental health does not discriminate, and bringing the point of a mother in to show that side, and a father and things like that. We don't see behind the scenes, so we don't know how much she struggles. She's got the money to pay for 5 nannies, and but again, you don't know what she's going through, because she might be a strong mother who isn't paying anyone to look after her. She might be going through it herself.
Or you know what, you might, and this was one of the things that ate away at me, is that she might, not that I'm putting myself on her level, by the way, but when my kids were in being looked after somebody else, you know, I felt guilt every single day of my life. Since my kids have been born, I have felt some form of guilt.
Right.
I have felt guilt that they were premature. I have felt guilt that they were in NICU. I have felt guilt that, you know, one had to be delivered earlier than he was ready because the other one wouldn't have made it. You know, and then I have felt guilt when I walked out the door to go to work because I should be at home with them. And then I felt guilty when I am home with them that I'm not invested enough in every second that I've got with them because I'm tired or I'm run down, or quite frankly, twins is just a nightmare because 2 people are screaming at me non-stop. And, you know, so I imagine that every single person, every mum and every dad carries those elements of guilt. And I know that when my other half isn't there, he feels guilty because he's not there, but then he's got to be at work, and vice versa, and that snowballs, and then you do start snapping at each other because it's like, well, why are you leaving early? Well, I'm going to the gym. Well, how come you're going to the gym? I'm still at home. And that's where those things just escalate, and you can see. And I think, you know, for us coming into a relationship where we didn't know each other that well before we started a family, it has put, you know, so many different challenges on it. But then I look at friends who have been in relationships for a long time, and it still puts so much challenges because it's parenting. And it just is the most stressful, unpredictable thing you go through in life. It challenges you like absolutely nothing else. And people say it is the most rewarding thing, but I think the hardest thing for any parent is there are days after days and weeks after weeks where you might not see those little rewards because you're tired and you're exhausted and you're burnt out and you're trying to, you know, in a lot of cases just pay bills and make ends meet, and you just, and you, I mean, I know that I suffer at the moment, probably one of the biggest things that drives my anxiety is fear that I'm not going to be able to provide them with everything that they want. Particularly having stepped down from a full-time job and working in a more casual capacity, I get scared witless. Like, what if I can't give them everything? What if I can't? And that's all you ever want from your kid, for your kids. And that makes it hard sometimes to enjoy every single little day and every single moment, because you know, it goes so quickly, you want to be in the moment, and then you're worried about the future, and it's a psychological complex. It's really
and it doesn't even make it easier. Like we was talking prior to this about childcare and the expenses of childcare these days. Like, because how much childcare is getting these days, it's like one of you may as well not work. And me and my wife always say to each other, like, one of our friends, she wasn't in a relationship for a long time, but she wanted a child, and she was like, I might do it myself. I take my hat off to any single parent out there, because my God, when there's 2 of you, it's hard enough. Trying to raise a child or being left alone to raise a child, God, they're amazing people.
And again, finding that balance between looking after themselves so you can be strong enough to be the best parent. You know, having to earn money and look after finances, and then be there for all those moments that you want for your kid is just, as you said, goes off to anyone in that situation.
So when was there a point, like you obviously said you needed to take a step back and realise all this, did you have a strong support network around you? Did you go and see a psychologist, or I know you said in the past you had issues so you knew how to deal with them, but where was there a turning point in yourself where going, I need to get a grip of this. I need to, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I think
get my head sorted a little bit.
I think for me the biggest turning point was probably, so my son was diagnosed, let's go with that, with what's called global developmental delay.
Right.
And I'd never heard of global developmental delay, but from the minute he was born, he's met his benchmarks, but not at the same time as his brother. And one of the hardest things about having twins is you should never compare them. And we never did, but there were just little red flags along the way that meant that we wanted to keep him engaged with his paediatrician.
Right.
And then when we got to 2.5, we were already dealing with a severe speech delay. He was very delayed in talking. And the paediatrician looked and said, look, again, we're not dealing with anything severe, but we could be looking at what's called global developmental delay, which is when a child is not meeting their milestones in up to around 3 to 5 different categories. So it may be from speech through to eating. We have a lot of sensory issues, food issues, sleep issues, but more so comprehension things. So he doesn't have the ability to process information as well as other kids. He still does, and he doesn't have the ability to cope with change and things that are going on around him quite as well. But he is very social and he's engaged. So it's a very unusual situation. And at this stage, I'd taken a different job, and that sort of stretched our family a bit. We were committed to doing it because I really wanted to work for this particular company. I'm very grateful for that opportunity, but I was suddenly put in this position where these development issues with him were becoming more apparent, and I was relying on external childcare, and he wasn't coping, and my other son was just not coping because he wasn't coping, and we were all not coping. And I think that was the moment when I sat back and went, I'm not coping.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest point for me, is that everyone around me had told me, and I knew, but that was the point when I realised I'm exhausted, I'm drained, and I'm not coping.
Yeah.
And that was part of the process of me saying, I can't get him through this, I can't get them through this, and I can't get us through this if I keep going down this pathway. And so that was for me, that moment where I had to sit back and almost say to myself, you've been through a lot of emotional stuff in the past, you know better, then you need to reach out to the right people. And I'd already seen a psychologist because I knew I was at that point. But for me, as I said, it was about something's got to give. And making that very tough decision, but realising that if I kept going, trying to juggle everything, no matter how much I love my job, there was going to be a day when I turned up and I couldn't do that either. And I didn't want that. And I didn't want the kids to not cope, and I didn't want my other half not to cope. And so that's when I stepped back and went, I'm the gel, the glue, if I don't look after me first. And the hardest thing for me was, I was talking about parenting.
So I think well, Go, you touched on it earlier. You mentioned that you obviously had issues in the past, and we've spoken openly about body issues like anorexia and things like that, because I went through. But as a mother, when you had twins and your body obviously changes a lot more, did the anxiety from previous things come back as well, or?
It's interesting because in the middle, I've had a ongoing battle since I recovered from, and I'm a lucky person because a totally another huge deep conversation, but I'm lucky that I can say I recovered from an eating disorder, particularly as severe as anorexia can get, because it's a rare thing, and I hold that wholeheartedly to my parents for absolute dedication and helping me work through that, to the point where I can say I don't think of food, which is a very unusual thing for somebody who's recovered from. There are times still when I get stressed and I can see my gut instinct is to I struggle to eat, but it's interesting because in the middle period sort of time between when I recovered from that and eventually when I fell pregnant with twins, and of course having had an eating disorder, there's the physiological side of things, you know, will you even be able to fall pregnant, all that sort of stuff. I then struggled with a lot of hormonal issues, which have been, you know, diagnosed from everywhere, from endometriosis to polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they can sort of never narrow it down. So I had to deal with my body changing through that as well. But I've really struggled to deal with my post-baby body.
Yeah.
I've tried to be that person to say, your body carried 2 humans. That's a miracle to itself. Yeah. But there's still that part of you that struggles with both age and the fact that you don't have time to invest as much as you could have. And you just simply, I feel like my body will never go back together. I know I'll watch this back and go, your arms are too flabby and this. So there is still that. Yeah. I try to block it from myself because I don't want to be that person, but there's still that feeling that I don't feel as pretty. I think that's probably the right way of explaining it. I don't feel as pretty as I want to.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I have felt pretty or proud of myself and my body since I've had my kids. Yeah. And I struggle with that. I do. Probably don't.
And the reason why I brought that up as well, I think you're gonna resonate with a lot of mothers out there. I know I brought up an old friend of mine in New Zealand, Hannah, and she, big fitness professional for Les Mills, trained all the time, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but she had a prolapse, and basically self-loved herself, just hated her body after. Sorry, that's my daughter. You can hear her in the background. We're talking motherhood, so you can hear the baby. We've got sound effects.
Perfect. Immersive experience, they call it.
But she literally, I was reading her blog the other day, so she started a blog on it. Yeah. And then she started taking images of what her body looks like now. Yeah. And she's so brutally honest about what she went through and how she felt like a bad mother because she was thinking about her body and what it used to be. And like, I think people forget there's big mental health issues within that. And I think she's doing huge things in like New Zealand with her writing at the moment, purely because so many women are resonating.
It's certainly something that I've thought of tapping into now. I've got some more time because, you know, I've been going back to the gym now, and I think probably for me the most heartbreaking thing was, I mean, I used to be very fit. You know, I studied a lot of fitness when I was younger before I got into media, and I used to run for 2 hours a day, obviously off the back of eating disorders. So, you know, you can go too far the other way. But the hardest thing for me was I reached an equilibrium in my mental and health state. And then having the boys has thrown me the other way. And you don't realise how hard a slog it is and how time poor and mentally time poor you are. It takes everything to get yourself back out there, and then you don't see those results quickly, and there's stuff that just, I have changed my whole way I dress, the way I present myself, because I'm not confident in who I am and how I feel anymore. And it is a big body image thing. I'm not proud to. I've got to go to the races on Friday, and I don't even want to go and buy a dress. I've been putting it off because I don't want to I don't want to go into a change room because I don't like what I look at like. And I tried to face it last year. I did. I stood there and I took that selfie in my underwear, and I was going to do that empowerment post exactly the same as your friend and say, I need to come to terms with this. But I was a coward and I backed out because I wasn't being honest. I'm not okay with how I look, and instead of trying to come to terms with it and try and work on it, and I am trying to work on it, but I want to be able to say, look at what my body did. My body carried 2 small humans. Like, what a miracle. But I still, I can't. I haven't got to that point, and instead I've changed who I am. And I think I'm probably not the only mum, maybe I am, but I've put myself so far down the ladder of priority that I'll confess I got my hair done last week for the first time in 9 months. Now I work in media. Now even though I work in radio, there's still Facebook and all that stuff. But I would just get up in the morning and throw my hair in a bun and not put any makeup on and wear the baggiest top like today and jeans, because I could hide behind that, because I'm proud of my sons at the moment, but I'm not proud of me.
So going back to that time when you was going through a lot of this, and career mums out there trying to juggle everything, what was a typical day night for you? Like get started at 4 a.m. you got up?
Yeah, so I get up at 4 a.m. and I'd literally just dump through the shower, throw my hair up, put whatever clothes were there and leave. If I was lucky, I'd be getting out of my bed with no children in it.
Right.
If I was unlucky, I'd be sleeping on the floor of my kids' room and getting up from there, sneaking out of their room to go. If my partner was home, because we did do a period of time where he was working away for a few nights a week, in that case I'd open the au pair's door so the boys were with her. And then I'd sneak off to work. I'd start work anywhere between 4:30, 5 o'clock, start curating stories for the show, co-host gets in, go through show planning, 3 hours of live radio, into planning meetings, back-to-back planning meetings. We'd start working on content for the day. We'd have meetings with national content directors, depends on what's going on, go see clients, all sorts of that radio stuff. And around about midday, my previous job, I wouldn't leave till 2:30, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to shift, because I was in at 5 o'clock and wasn't getting home until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
My most recent position, I was leaving a little bit earlier, which was giving me some more time. But as soon as I walked in the door, my au pair clocked off and I clocked home to mum. Now, one of the things with radio is it's not a job like any live media that really finishes. You're always looking for stories. You're always seeing what's going on Facebook. So for one of the things I had to consciously work on was putting my phone down for blocks of time and not worrying about, was that video going well on Facebook, or was the meme getting traction, and actually focus on the kids. And then it would jump in. I'd try and be home for lunch because Hunter won't eat, so he won't eat without me.
Right.
So my first job is sit down and try and get him to eat a piece of toast with Vegemite on it, and that would be sometimes an hour process for us.
Wow.
And I always tried to take that pressure off my girls, my au pairs, so that they had, my important thing was that they were okay, because they were responsible for looking after those kids when myself and Chris weren't there.
Yeah.
So that was a really key thing, to make sure that they had their breaks. And so then I'd just go straight into mum mode, and it was just, lunch into some kind of afternoon activity. I'd try and take them to the park, and I don't know how other career mums felt, but by the time I got to that 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd want to sit there and watch them play.
Yeah.
But I lacked I felt vague. I still sometimes do, because my sons don't sleep properly, and you're running on empty, and you want to take in every moment, but you suddenly realise you've almost vagued out. Not that you're not paying attention to your kids, but you're not absorbing it all, because you're running from behind. For then, we'd go through the same process in the evening. Dinner would be a very long process for us, and then bath, bed. I'd try and get them into bed always by 7 o'clock. I'm very routine driven, because you have to be. And that was my time. We'd sit down, we'd have dinner, we'd have our showers. I'd go to bed pretty much after that, after doing the last check on content. And by 10:30, Hunter was awake again. Wow. Now that's if we've had a good night. My kids don't settle. Well, Hunter doesn't self-settle either, because he gets very, very bad anxiety.
Yeah.
And to have that highlighted in a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest things for me that I'm working on with my family at the moment is, I think of periods of my time where anxiety has crippled me.
Yeah.
And I've ridden through, and I would put a brave face on everything, as we all do, but I've had those, times after times where I've closed the door and just lost it, or I've got in the car and just broken down.
Yeah.
Because my anxiety has been so bad that I felt like I didn't know how to function at times. And I'd say most people wouldn't know. They would never have known that's what was going on inside.
Yeah.
And for somebody to sit there and identify that a child has elements of anxiety, I would move heaven on earth to make sure that he has the ability to cope with that as best as possible moving forward in his life. And I know a lot of people are, how can you diagnose anxiety in a 3-year-old? But they're seeing signs, and developmental psychologists come so far now that, you know, we're naive if we sit there and go, early intervention is key, we're just going to ignore it. You know, we're not living back in those days. And so, yeah, for me, he and his night anxiety, he would get so upset at night having to go to sleep without me that he would make himself physically sick.
Wow.
So I'd be sitting there at night, sometimes with Chris away, sometimes with him home, or he having to work late, and I'd have this kid that was just losing it, having to go to sleep. You can't walk out on a child in that stage. It's self-settling, and he actually self-settled okay when he was younger. He was the first one to. But then whatever in his developmental cycle changed, he's got worse as he's got older, and the other one's got better. So, you know, and then we'd go through cycles where he'd wake up every 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that's it. Some nights we'd have good nights and he might wake up, you know, 1 or 2 nights, 2 times through the nights, and other nights I literally would just sleep on the floor with my hand in his cot, waiting for my alarm to go off at 4 o'clock and start again.
Wow. But it's funny what you say with that, because when you feel this self-judgment, like some of our friends, when we said at times we had Lincoln, our son, sleep with us most nights in the bed, and they was like, no, we made sure that our child was in the cot in the other room, and we set it out from the beginning. And we'd get home at night sometimes going, how the did they do that? It was like, you were so mentally drained, your body's physically exhausted. It takes all of you to even just wake your eyes up sometimes to walk across the room to the cot, let alone another room. To keep doing it, it's easier just to get them in bed with you and just, and like, I laugh sometimes because I'll see my wife, and still to this day, if Lincoln comes walking in the room and just gets in the bed, she still, because of all those years, sleeps right at the edge of the bed. Right, almost as if half her body is off the bed. Whereas I've got like a full space, he's tucked up in that cuddle with her, and I'm like he's 6 now, like he doesn't sleep with us, but he'll walk in sometimes, and he'll get in early in the morning when he's woke up, and I'll be like, he's big enough now to push him over, like roll him over, and she's just so accustomed to that edge of the bed thing.
Isn't
like,
that funny how you adapt?
But it's good when people open up and share the stories, because so many people try and put that mask on.
And you know what, because both my sons were diagnosed with severe colic.
Right.
So we had colic issues right from the word go. And look, if you've never had a colicky baby, I honestly, I cannot express, I want to say luck, but just be grateful, because it can be the most hideous thing. It breaks you, because you cannot get these babies to calm down. Right. And I had 2 colicky babies. Often, you know, Chris had to go back to work, and then I had to go back to work, and we're juggling everything. When we had our first au pair and nanny, we used to just say, just walk, just put them in the pram and walk. Yeah. Because that's the only thing that will settle them. And, you know, and I would come home and I would take it all, and we would spend hours, literally hours, pacing up and down rooms with these babies. Sometimes, you know, both of them over the shoulders, just trying to calm them. I have one time, we were nearly at the 6-month mark, and Harrison was so bad, I was just in tears. And I was like, I can't do that. I was literally convinced there was something wrong with this kid, and I took him to the emergency department. And I sat there and I just cried, and I said, my kid's broken. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, no, but I'm okay in that sense, but I'm not okay because I feel like maybe I'm missing something. And they were brilliant. They looked thoroughly, and they did everything they can, and they said, look, we can't, it is just colic. And I remember walking out going, what is just colic? And it is the most horrific thing. And we had to do everything we could to try and get these babies to sleep, and then to stay asleep. And then as they progress towards, you know, you're told within 3 to 6 months they grow out. They didn't. 6 to 9 months, they didn't. Wow. 9 to 12 months, they didn't. 12 to 13 months, Hunter started to grow out of it. And we were like, okay, cool, we've got one kid that's going to sleep. Harrison just could not break it. And and I remember, you know, there's those sleep, you can go to hospitals and they help you with sleep stuff. And I remember being, because we were in the country, we weren't in the city at that stage. And I remember ringing them and going, what do I do? You know, and they're giving me all these techniques, you know, pat them on the back for 10 minutes and then walk out for 10 minutes and then come back. I'll be here all night. And they're like, you know, you need to let them cry it out. If I tried to let Harry cry it out, he would break me before I could break him. I would be sitting there going, I've got to get up and go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, I haven't eaten. This kid is just not stopping.
Yeah.
And then I had a very frank conversation with my mother. And she said to me, do you know any 15-year-old boys that need to be patted to sleep by their mothers? I'm like, what are you talking about, Mum? You're stupid. And she's like, no, think about it. He will get there. And after that, I chucked it, kind of chucked every book out anyway, but I chucked out the theory, and the same with dummies. Because we needed dummies in our world. We had to. And even now, I admit, my 3-year-old boys, at night, they're allowed to have them just to fall asleep, and then they have to hand them over.
Yeah.
Because again, what 15-year-old boy has a dummy stuck in their mouth? They get there.
Yeah.
They don't have to be falling asleep perfectly. And if they sleep with you, but you all get sleep, for God's sake, it works.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough of that messaging out there that, you know what, it's okay to sleep with your baby. It's okay to sleep I spent the first 3 months sleeping on the couch.
Yeah.
With 2 bassinets, 2 swings next to me, and half of the time the baby's just peeled on me. This is the only way any of us got an hour's sleep.
Yeah.
And
but I think with your story and with more people opening up about it, it resonates because it's real life. And coming to the fact of judgment from people who don't necessarily have kids, or, you know, when you've had it, and I never realised this till we had kids, is like, probably be nicer and more understanding to people with kids. Like when you're on a plane and you hear kids screaming, or you see kids and you think, oh my God, I'm going to be sat next to kids. Until you've got those kids, you don't realise. And we was once driving, and Lincoln was about 4, and we don't give him the iPad much, but when he wouldn't settle and stuff like that, we'd got the iPad on the back of the car seat, just with his nursery things.
Yep,
and I remember we pulled up at traffic lights, and there was a car full of young boys, and they had the windows down, and that like they was looking, and I wound my window down, and there was one guy, and a bit of a smart ass, and he was like, oh, we was just talking and just wondering about these parents like that give the kids like iPads and things, like, do you think it worked? And I just turned around and I was like, you've got no kids, have you?
Yeah.
And he was like, no. I was like, give it 10 years, mate.
Yeah.
Just give it 10 years.
That's it. And it's so, you go back to that space where you're, in your early 20s and you're going
and you do have that judgment yourself a little bit.
You do, and you think, oh, I was never like that. I travelled a lot when I was younger because I lived over in Europe for a long time. But I remember the first time we went to Hawaii with the boys when they were 6 months old because I needed something. I needed something. And I remember thinking, and I do every plane flight I've been on and every place I go in public, I think, I almost think I shouldn't take my kids.
Yeah, right.
But you know what? I've got 2 Labradors at home in my backyard. I'm a glutton for punishment. 2 Labradors and twins. God. Now I don't take my Labradors everywhere because they're animals. Yeah. These are human beings.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't not take your kids to the supermarket.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Chris used to get completely, probably kill me for saying this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. He used to get anxious having the thought of taking the kids to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And
I can imagine.
I'd say to him, we'll stop in the supermarket, we'll get out, we'll go around the supermarket. And he's like, no, I'll take the kids home, you go. And it took me a while to realise that he felt that way. He felt like it was just going to be such a nightmare. We shouldn't have them there. And I remember saying, but they won't get used to it if they don't go. And they're human beings. They're allowed on a plane and they're allowed in a car. And if they need an iPad, give them a bloody iPad. Yeah. I know there's screen time issues, and whenever possible, when they're at home and they're in their security, or if they're at school or at their preschool, 100%. Yeah. But when you're trying to do your groceries or go to dinner with friends, then I will not leave to go out anywhere now without an iPad, because I know if Hunter has a meltdown, I can put on Bluey, and in 2 seconds, with 2 cars, a milkshake and Bluey, I can calm that kid down and everyone's okay. Yep. And I don't care who judges me, because they don't know my son. They don't know that he's overwhelmed and that's his secure space. he's not going to be glued to Blue for the next 6 hours and do it every day.
Yeah.
But where we can go out, and I think in today's environment, like our parents didn't go out. They didn't have a social life, but we want to, and more venues are catering towards families, and we want to go out with friends and have a glass of wine and let our kids be there.
But talking to that with our parents and things like that, and I never knew this growing up, because I did have this mentality of, you go out to a nice restaurant and you go to a pub, and then you'd see kids running around. And I did used to think, like, why aren't the parents making them sit down? Like, we're in a public place, like, get them to sit down. Wasn't until I had a kid and someone explained to me and goes, without the iPads and everything, when they weren't as big as they are now, if I don't let them run that energy out, they're going to be making a bigger fuss and they're going to be screaming this place down. So they're okay running around if they're not bothering people, but if they're just doing it. And that changed my whole thought. And I was just like, that makes so much sense.
It does. And I think one of the things is as parents, we need to accept the fact that, and I know that, again, going into a relationship very quickly, our lives changed very, very quickly. Yeah. You know, we were two independent, strong people, and suddenly we were a cohesive family. So there's still times where, you know, one or other of us will go to do something, and we're like, oh, hang on, we've got kids. You know? And I think every parent goes through that. And I think that, you know, there's times where you have to pull yourself up and go, I can't go out to things that I used to go to because I'm a parent now. Yeah. But also, it needs to be okay that if it is a family-friendly environment, that anybody who's in that environment accepts the fact that kids are allowed to run around and as you said, as long as they're not like out of control, like, you know, kids need to be allowed to be kids. Yeah. And, you know, there is that balance of parents understanding you can't take your kids everywhere and you do need to control them. You do need to be in control of them. Yeah. You know, one of our big things is we're very, I don't like using the word strict, but I'm sure if anybody looked through my window, I'm structured. Yeah. You know, I'm strong and because I've got two boys at the same age. Everything is a wrestle fight. Everything is a competition.